Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is Pittsburgh and the massacre of 11 elderly Jews while praying in synagogue. This is a critical story that shakes the very fabric of the United States, and even more so the fabric of the Jewish community. It challenges our safety and security and calls into question whether the United States is any different than all the other places in the world where Jews lived and where they were persecuted. All the victims were murdered because they were Jews, for no other reason. Seldom in the 240-year history of the United States is the case that Jews were murdered for one reason alone, because they were Jewish. The mass murder of 11 Jews while praying in synagogue on a Sabbath morning stunned America. The reaction was still apparent days later, the story continuing to dominate the headlines. And not just in the United States. Interest in this horrific event perpetrated upon 11 Jews resonates in Europe. Why? Why is Europe so enthralled with the story? There are two reasons. First is shock and dismay, no doubt about it. Second is that Europeans need to prove to themselves, to the United States and to Israel, that Europe is not the only place where anti-Semitism lurks. Israel is also spinning from the catastrophe. Israeli media was multi-focused on the crime, on the victims, and on the perpetrator of the crime. They are also asking an all-important question. Israeli media is asking, is it still safe for Jews to live in America as Jews? It's the ultimate question about Zionism. The original Zionists advocated leaving the diaspora because of the dangers in the diaspora, leaving every country except the United States because the United States was different. They were supposedly safe. This attack calls that assumption into question. The horror, the questions, and hopefully the outrage as well, will be with us for a very, very long time. May the memories of these 11 innocent Jews be blessed. May their lives be remembered and their story retold. I'm also thinking about how on Wednesday, October 26th, 1994, 24 years ago, Israel and Jordan signed the peace treaty. The signing took place in the Arava Desert, straddling the border of both countries. At the time, Yitzhak Rabin was the Israeli prime minister, and Hussein, the father of today's Jordanian ruler, was king of Jordan. President Bill Clinton flew in to take part and speak at the signing. It was a powerful moment in Middle East history. I remember every single detail, and it was a very long day. It was the first peace treaty I witnessed in person. I had seen the peace treaty being signed between Egypt and Israel, but only on television. And a year before the Jordanian signing, I watched the signing of the Camp David Accords on the White House lawn, again on television. This time I was there, somewhere in the desert. Literally, at the time, the guests were not told where we were going. We were told only to board the buses and that we would be driven to the location. It was hot. It was worth it all. Despite the fact that, other than Bill Clinton, there were a few big-name attendees at the signing, mostly garden variety diplomats and a lot of press, a tremendous amount of excitement swirled around the Jordanian deal. The hope was that in contrast to the peace between Egypt and Israel, which was a cold peace, this would bring about a warm peace. The most interesting sidebar of the treaty signing was the camaraderie between President Clinton and Prime Minister Rabin, the person who would not too long after eulogize as his chaver, as his friend. During a seemingly endless reading by the Jordanian imam of a surah in the Quran, Rabin reached into his pocket and pulled out a baseball cap, and Clinton straightened it for him. Then Rabin took out his speech and started reviewing it. Clinton leaned over and read along. The President of the United States even used his finger to point out several elements in the Israeli's speech. It was quaint. It was touching. 24 years later, several prime ministers later, and one king later, despite some ups and downs, the treaty has held strong. Right now, it's one of those down times. Part of the treaty, part of the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan is an agreement which Jordan would lease lands to Israel. Those lands included parts of the Arava Desert and a section of the Jordan River with an island in its center called Naharaim. The island has a second name. It's called the Island of Peace. It is where the Yarmouk River meets the Jordan River, and where, in 1932, Pinchas Rottenberg built a hydroelectric plant. The treaty clearly states that Naharaim is in Jordan and that the Jordanians will lease the land to Israel and give them access. It also clearly states that the land deal ends in 2019 and then is up for renewal. According to the treaty, Jordan has the right not to renew the lease if they follow one single condition. That condition is that 1 year prior, in October of 2018, the Jordanians informed the Israelis that the lease will not be renewed. King Abdullah of Jordan has made that announcement. The Jordanians' official public decision took Israel by surprise, even though Jordan's king had made several earlier announcements indicating that he does not intend to carry on with the leasing arrangement. But Israel did not take the king seriously. They did not make the diplomatic effort necessary to squelch the issue, and now they are in trouble. For Israel, Naharaim and the Jordan Island is not only an essential water source, it's a place where in 1997, 7 Israeli schoolgirls were murdered by a Jordanian soldier. 14 other students were seriously wounded. Naharaim resonates with history and with emotion for Israelis. Dropping the ball on this lease renewal is a diplomatic blunder far greater than the seemingly obvious. Adopting an adolescent-like stance, Israel assumed that they would deal with it, that it was no big problem. But it is a big problem. The king of Jordan is promising to return the lands to their rightful owners. Original owners they are. His commitment to the people of Jordan is as strong as Israel's commitment to the memories of those young women who died at Naharaim. Israeli diplomatic leadership made a massive miscalculation. I've also been thinking about Israel and the United States in politics. 'Tis the season, as the saying goes. It's essential that both Democratic and Republican support of Israel be a sine qua non. And right now, that axiom seems to be on skittish ground. There's a feeling among many members of the Jewish community that the once solid and unwavering support of the Democratic Party for Israel is eroding. It is not that the party platform has changed, but that there are a growing number of political figures within the Democratic Party who are openly and aggressively questioning the United States' support for Israel. Not too very long ago, it would have been unthinkable to question the loyalty of Democrats towards Israel. For supporters of Israel in the United States and also from Israel, they were the go-to party. Over the past generation, there seems to have been a flip-flop in U.S. politics over Israel. Democrats were considered unquestionably staunch, wall-to-wall supporters of Israel. Republicans were considered wishy-washy, parva at best, and there were even whispers among Jewish leadership that some Republicans harbored outright anti-Semitic attitudes. One cannot forget the comment made by James Baker, Secretary of State under the administration of George W. Bush, known in Israeli circles as Bush Ha'av, Bush the father, that went like this: blank the Jews, they don't vote for us anyway. Today, you can often hear longtime registered Democrats explain that for over a decade they have voted Republican because of the positions Democratic candidates have voiced on Israel. Many Israelis agree, and they too are voicing the opinion that actually the conviction that in 2018 Republicans are the friends of Israel and the Democrats are not. And that is not good news. This split, where one party is considered a friend and the other is considered to be, well, not quite the enemy, certainly untrustworthy, is extremely dangerous. It's dangerous for U.S. policy towards Israel, and it's dangerous for Jews in the United States. The perception of the role of Jews in politics in the United States directly impacts Israel's security. And when Israel's security is at stake, the stability of the entire Middle East is at stake. It is crucial that Jewish leadership articulates a clear, non-party stance when it comes to supporting Israel in the United States. And that is a responsibility they have not upheld these past few years in administrations. Jewish leadership must have the ear of both Democrats and Republicans. It's not good enough to change loyalty with each incoming administration, zigzagging from political victor to victor. Jewish support must remain constant, and that means remaining supportive of both parties. It means maintaining and strengthening ties with both parties. It means cultivating relationships with politicians on both sides of the aisle. The political pendulum swings. It swings in the United States just as it does in Israel. And the issue of support for Israel is greater than any party affiliation. Young and newly elected politicians from Congress and Senate, from mayors to governors need to be educated about the importance of Israel to their party and to the security of the United States. Their education should be transmitted by their political mentors, as well as by Jewish donors and Jewish communal leaders. There is no reason for there to be any doubt about either party, Democrat or Republican, and their support for Israel. And the responsibility for making that happen rests squarely, heavily on Jewish shoulders. The vast majority of Jews in America are registered Democrats. The overwhelming majority of Jews vote Democrat. Times have changed since the election of Roosevelt, who garnered over 90% of the Jewish vote. But they are still a strong voting bloc. Today, about 75% of America's Jews vote Democratic, while 21% vote Republican. But 21% is still a significant number, and Republicans are well aware of that significance. The power of the Jewish community on the political level is tied to the fact that Jews come out and vote, especially in the primary elections. Voter turnout for Jews is 85%. For the rest of America, it's 50%. Israel is important to the Jewish community, there's no question, and that's why it should be important to the United States, and that it should be reflected in U.S. foreign policy. Famous politically active Jewish billionaires aside, contributions from Jews amount to over 50% of the Democratic war chest in election years, and to about 25% of the Republican contributions. As interesting as those facts and figures are, they are independent of the real reason for why the United States, no matter which party has wrested control, should support Israel. Israel and the United States have a relationship, unlike any other nations divided by miles and oceans and language. When working effectively, this symbiosis translates to a better world and a safer world. By virtue of the shared values, shared educational foundations, and shared vision and mission, the United States and Israel provide the rest of the world with tools that advance humanity. That should never change, no matter which political parties are in power. Political party leadership is fleeting. Humanity is forever. Coming up, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. I want to highlight just two of a slew of pieces written about the Pittsburgh massacre. Maybe I'll continue to discuss this for weeks to come. There are so many excellent pieces devoted to various aspects of this horror, not simply the actual event, but the significance of the event and its impact. First up is a column from the New York Post. It's by Podhoretz, a weekly columnist. He is also the editor of Commentary. It was published on October 29th, 2018. The column is called What I Learned as an American Jew After the Pittsburgh Synagogue Attack. Podhoretz begins, "On this day, of all days, it needs to be said, America has been a blessing for the Jewish people unlike any other blessing given to any other people in the history of the world. One crime, or 29 separate crimes, committed at the same time by a monster in human form, cannot be allowed to overshadow this extraordinary fact. My own gratitude to America is actually greater today than it was yesterday because of the outpouring of grief and rage and common humanity we have witnessed in the response to the horror in Pittsburgh. The Philo-Semitic response to this unspeakable act of anti-Semitism reveals how American Jews are anchored in America in a way that Jews who have lived anywhere else outside of Israel are not anchored to the lands in which they reside or have ever resided." Podhoretz continues and explains how we are both Americans and Jews, and how there is no contradiction in that fact. He writes, "We are Americans and we are Jews, and there is no contradiction between the two. When people talk freely and foolishly and noxiously about America as having been built on racism, there is one simple answer to their libel. George Washington's letter to a synagogue in Newport, written in August 1790. The citizens of the United States of America have a right to applaud themselves for having given to mankind examples of an enlarged and liberal policy, a policy worthy of imitation. All possess alike liberty of conscience and immunities of citizenship," Washington wrote. "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." That final phrase, taken from the prophet Micah, was violated in the most obscene way on Saturday. But the story of America is a story of a country that has indeed served as a vine and fig tree for the world's most beleaguered peoples. I'm a little biased here because I love the prophet Micah for obvious reasons. But seriously, this phrase encapsulates the prophetic sense of shleimut, of contentment. It comes from the same word and the same root, the same basis as the word shalom. Podhoretz concludes a powerful set of points. He returns to the fig tree. Adolf Hitler was not only passionate about removing the Jewish people from this earth, he wanted to eliminate defectives as well. The Bible lays out 613 commandments. All Jews are to follow. The theologian Emil Fackenheim argued in 1967 that there was a 614th, the commandment of Auschwitz. Let there be Jews, all Jews of all kinds, to keep the memory of the Rosenthal brothers for a blessing and those who were slaughtered along with them. We American Jews can and should do no less than to ensure the Jewish people survive and thrive fully American, as ever, but under our own vine and fig tree. One correction, Podhoretz, who doesn't often make mistakes, got the essence of Fackenheim correct, but it needs a little tweaking. In a series of lectures, Fackenheim embellished his original 614th commandment to be, let there be Jews. The original 614th was, thou shalt not give Hitler a posthumous victory. Second up is a column from the New York Times. It was published on October 30th, 2018 by Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States and currently deputy minister in the Prime Minister's office. Oren is a historian and the author of several essential books about Israel. He has a very keen mind. In this case, I think his timing is off, but still important for us to read. The column is called What Israel Owes American Jews. You'll understand as we read Oren's column. This is how Oren begins. The massacre of 11 worshippers in the Pittsburgh synagogue has profoundly shocked Israelis. Though seemingly desensitized by years of terror on our buses, streets, much of this vulnerable country has been left speechless by the news of Jews being gunned down during Shabbat prayers by a ranting anti-Semite. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Reuven Rivlin fiercely condemned the massacre and expressed full solidarity with our American brothers and sisters. Naftali Bennett, the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, flew immediately to Pennsylvania. And yet, for all these expressions of sympathy, Israel still refuses to recognize the conservative movement to which all 11 victims belonged. These are important issues. The chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel, David Lau, did not call the synagogue a synagogue, but rather a Jewish center. Oren is correct that there are real issues pulling at Israel and diaspora regarding basic recognition. But this was not the time to dwell on those issues. He should have moved on with his other thesis, which became buried. And that issue is, by the way, the role of Israel and the United States Jews in curbing Iran's nuclear advances. Oren concludes by writing the following. In the aftermath of this horrific massacre, the Israel government must do more than express condolences. Threatened by rising anti-Semitism, American Jewish communities need to know that Israel is behind them, and not only in words. Now is the time to realize our historic mission, comply with our own law, and reinforce the unity that has sustained us for thousands of years through exiles, expulsions, genocide, and rebirth. By recognizing conservative and reformed Jewry, Israel will not only defy the anti-Semites, but also, more important, reaffirm itself. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show 3 cartoons today, all about Pittsburgh, of course. The first is by Dale Cummings, published on October 31st, 2018, and it's titled Tree of Life Slayings. A U.S. flag is flying at half-mast. In place of the 50 white stars on the normal U.S. flag, there are 11 stars of David, a very powerful image. Second up is a cartoon by Steve Zack, published on October 30th, 2018, and it is called Anti-Semitism Infestation. It was published in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Uncle Sam is sticking his head into the attic, and the attic is infested with bats. The caption reads, Anti-Semitism. Third and last up is a simple and profound image by Yaakov Kirshen, by Drybones. It was published on October 28th and is entitled, "We Are One." A memorial candle, or a yahrzeit lamp, is lit. The top caption reads, "We are one." The bottom caption reads, "Pittsburgh." In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Iranian news media announced that their president's phone was tapped. President Hassan Rouhani's cell phone was compromised, according to the Iranian student news agency ISNA. Iran knows that they are vulnerable. Since Stuxnet virus ran rampant in 2011, Iran has realized the potential risks of technology and hacking. General Gholam Reza Jalali is the head of a military unit in charge of combating sabotage in Iran. The authorities in Iran are saying that Rouhani's phone was tapped recently, and that would be replaced with a more secure device. Jalali did not provide any other details. The Israeli media has reported that the IDF chief of staff met with more than one, actually a handful of military chiefs of staff from Arab countries during his last trip to Washington. The Israeli press also described a $250 million deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal is for the highly sophisticated defense weapons, specifically the Iron Dome anti-missile system. This deal is coming to light, and it's huge. While it is evident that Israel is getting closer and closer to Arab leaders, supplying cutting-edge defense weapons with the best possible computer technology is pushing the envelope. With all countries, but especially with the actions of Saudi Arabia, Israel needs to be very careful about the sale of weapons. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took a 2-day trip to Oman. It was a secret trip. By now, we all know about the trip, but the secrecy was lifted only after Netanyahu left Oman. The purpose of the trip was obvious. It was another in the series of steps opening up the Arab and Islamic world to Israel. After the Israeli Prime Minister left Oman, Omani Foreign Minister Yusuf bin Alawi released the following statement. Israel is a state present in the region, and we all understand this. The world is also aware of this, and maybe it's time for Israel to be treated the same as other states, and to also bear the same obligations. The Foreign Minister made this statement while attending the IISS, which is the International Institute for Security Studies. It was a conference in Manama, Bahrain. Omani leadership is taking a big step forward. They are boldly advancing interaction with Israel in the public eye and even suggesting that the rest of the states in the region do the same. Kudos to Omani leadership. It's happening over and over again. The code red alert sounds in southern Israel. Families scramble to grab their sleeping children and rush them into safe rooms. Unfortunately, this may become the new norm. Israel is now evaluating and reevaluating the response. Palestinians of Gaza have launched over 40,000 rockets into Israel. In an Israeli army ceremony marking the transition of leadership in the IDF, of the outgoing IDF officer in charge of the region, said the Palestinian terrorists continually attempt to attack Israel from beneath the ground, from the air, and on the ground. But thus far, Israel has the ability to stop them. Israel has begun to act aggressively against Palestinian units, launching incendiary balloons and rockets against Israel. That seems to have been the decision of the Prime Minister's inner cabinet, his security cabinet. In the meantime, the Palestinians have quieted down because of Israel's more aggressive response. Israel wants to cap the tension using drones, helicopters, fighter jets. They do not want to risk the cost of Israeli casualties that are inevitable in a ground invasion. The Palestinians want to push Israel to agitate just up to the point of forcing an increase in Israel's response, especially avoiding an all-out advance. So that for the Palestinians, they've caused Israel to use more aerial strikes. That response would be considered a moderate increase in activity. But the Palestinian rockets are extremely unpredictable. An Iran rocket will hit an Israeli civilian target. That single rocket could topple the entire fragile balance, preventing an all-out war. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that I spoke earlier about the idea presented by Norman Podhoretz about the fig tree. I mentioned that it was the prophetic ideal of contentment, shleimut, the word from shalom. The notion of happiness in Judaism is best described by the prophets in the symbol form. It's hard to articulate happiness, but in a desert pastoral environment, it's very easy to imagine sitting under a fig tree and a vine. If the fig tree is present, it means that there's shade, that there's food, that there's water, all things you need for sustenance. It also paints a picture of time to sit and rest, or sit and learn. That's the biblical ideal. Today we need to figure out how to discover our own fig tree. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.